All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Emma Reiner, and I'm the Family and Community Educator at the Nebraska State Historical Society. Welcome to the Nebraska History Museum, and thank you for attending this month's Lunchbox lecture. This history lecture series takes place on the third Tuesday of every month in the Old Father Auditorium at the Nebraska History Museum in Lincoln, Nebraska. You can learn more about our museum, our programming, and all the services we provide at the Nebraska State Historical Society website, history.nebraska.gov. If you're not already a member of the Nebraska State Historical Society, I encourage you to join. The support of our members makes it possible for us to present free programs like this one to Nebraskans statewide. A special thank you to the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation, whose support allows us to record and broadcast these programs across the state and online. We would also like to thank LNKTV, a service of the City of Lincoln, for producing these programs. If you'd like to watch previous programs or check out the Nebraska History Podcast, you can do so on YouTube at NE Historical. Today's Lunchbox lecture speaker is Jade Mendoza. Jade is the Standing Structure Survey Coordinator for the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office, where she has worked since 2021. She leads statewide efforts to document and preserve Nebraska's built environment through field surveys, research, and public outreach. Jade currently manages a 2-year project launched in May 2024 to identify and contextualize Green Book sites across Nebraska. The project incorporates archival research, oral histories, and collaboration with local communities. Today, in her talk titled Power of Place, Jade will share insights on this statewide thematic survey, which focuses on businesses, residences, and community spaces that served Black travelers during the Jim Crow era. Although the project will not be completed until May of 2026, this talk offers a first look at research findings, notable sites, and the collaborative process behind uncovering the important chapter of Nebraska's history. Please join me in welcoming Jade.
All right, I'll let everyone get settled in really quick. I was not expecting this many people, so wow, thank you so much for being here today. I just want to give a quick thank you to the Nebraska History Museum and the education staff. Emma, thank you for inviting me to be here today. Thank you to the foundation for allowing these to be put on, and thank you to the Historic Society for employing me for the last 4 years and encouraging and supporting this research. Today's talk is The Power of Place, the Green Book and the Hidden History of Black Travel in Nebraska. So as Emma said, this research is still ongoing, but I'm going to share a bit more about the work that I do and what my office does and why we do this work. And then we'll get into talking about the Green Book in Nebraska Green Book sites and what work we're doing to help preserve and promote these stories and places. So first of all, I think it's important for everyone to understand what historic preservation actually is. Now, when I tell people I'm a preservationist, oftentimes they ask, like, so is that like Indiana Jones or like Night at the Museum? Like, no, close, I guess. So what historic preservation actually is the identification, protection, and stewardship of places that tell the stories of our past. So I'm just going to read real quick what the definition of stewardship is, because I think this really encompasses what it means to be a preservationist. Stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. The careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. So preservation is buildings, it's neighborhoods, it's landscapes, sites, and structures that hold architectural, cultural, and historical significance. We ensure that their longevity and continued relevance is still around for future generations to enjoy and learn from. And it involves making ethical decisions about their maintenance, their use, and how we interpret their stories. So when we talk about preservation, we don't mean freezing buildings in time. That's often a very common misconception, but what preservation is really about is about honoring the stories that these places hold. We don't want to keep them exactly as they were, so sometimes that means restoring a building, but other times that means commemorating what's no longer there or making space for new uses that still respects the past. So preservation helps us understand where we come from. As humans, we're always on the search for our meaning, so it contributes to this idea that humans matter, our stories matter, and the places that we have designed matter. Preservation supports community identity and pride, especially in Nebraska, where we're very known for our Nebraskan pride. It encourages sustainable reuse of resources. So in my opinion, there's nothing better than taking something old and making it new for something different and better. And lastly, preservation can help drive local economic development and tourism. So the work that we do, these stories, they help us, the stories that the buildings help tell, they're often hidden in plain sight on your street, in your neighborhood, or in forgotten buildings, but preservation helps us honor them. So as Emma mentioned, I work for the State Historic Preservation Office. It's kind of a mouthful, so we're adamantly known as SHPO. All 50 states in the US have a SHPO, as well as the territories have a SHPO. And there's also something called THPO, so the tribes have their own preservation office as well. We have a lot of responsibilities. We are responsible for identifying and documenting historic places. And when I say historic, oftentimes I'm referring to a building or a structure must be at least 50 years or older. There are some more criteria than that, but when I'm saying historic, that's mostly what I'm referring to. We review projects that may affect historic resources. So if there's a project going on that might adversely affect a building or a structure, we will help mitigate those to make sure that the place is still preserved and its story is still told. We support preservation through grants, tax credits, and planning, and we maintain the state's National Register of Historic Places. So if you're not familiar with the National Register of Historic Places, you've probably seen a plaque somewhere on a historic building, but what that is really the nation's official list of sites, buildings, structures, districts, and objects deemed worthy of preservation for their historical significance or greater artistic value. So my role in SHPO, I am the survey coordinator. I am that green circle in the middle. Survey is the foundation of all of our other programs. Let me go back real quick. There are 9 of us in office, each responsible for a different area, and all of our programs work together kind of like a wheel. You can think of it. One doesn't function without the other, so we're a very collaborative office. Like I said, I am the standing structure survey coordinator, so anything above the ground I am responsible for across the entire state of Nebraska. So the way I describe surveying, it's the detective work. It helps us document what's still standing, what's been lost, and what stories haven't been told yet. So I manage and support the surveys of historic buildings. My work involves coordinating field work and documentation efforts. We support communities in identifying historic resources, because sometimes communities don't even actually realize what resources they have and how important they are or once were. And we want to bring that to light again and share those stories. I ensure that survey data is accurate, accessible, and useful. And we use survey data to inform preservation planning and city planning and policy. So I help build the foundation of preserving Nebraska's architectural and cultural heritage, one structure at a time. This picture up there is some early surveyors measuring the Kentucky School for the Blind in Louisville, Kentucky in 1934. I don't actually go out and measure your buildings, but I do help coordinate the consultants that do the field work, and they do all of the survey work from the public right-of-way. So they drive the streets and walk the sidewalks and are taking into account your buildings and assessing their integrity. So that brings us to why you all came here today. And first, I just want to talk about what this project actually is before I get into giving you what you came here for to learn more about the Green Book and its role in Nebraska. So this is a 2-year-long project. We are contracted with Stantec, which is a sustainable engineering and architectural consulting firm. They are helping us document all the remaining sites that were once related to Green Book. They are also assessing for the National Register of Historic Places eligibility, so they're taking into account what condition they're in, if they've been altered or changed, or in some cases even moved. They are also creating what's called an MPDF, a multiple property document form. That is also a mouthful. We like our acronyms in SHPO. But what an MPDF is, it's a cover document used in the process of nomination. It helps serve as a framework for evaluating eligibility of related property types that are connected by a specific theme. So surveys can be divided into two different categories. They can be geographic, so all of the buildings or structures in in maybe a county, a city, a neighborhood, or they can be thematic, all of the buildings in this instance related to the Green Book. So this screenshot you see up here, this is our Green Book page. You can find it on our website. It tells you all about the project you're going to hear today and where all of our future research will be accessible. I didn't put a link up there or QR code. I actually found out about 5 minutes beforehand that our QR code is no longer linked, so I apologize for that. But if you search the Nebraska Green Book Project, we should be one of the first returned searches. So I want to encourage you to go after this talk and go explore it more. So, what is the Negro Motorist Green Book? I'm going to paint a little bit of a story here for you. So during the mid-20th century, Americans fell in love with the idea of the road trip. The middle class was on the rise. More people had cars and jobs, more time for leisure and vacation. A newly built interstate system, finished with the Federal Highway Act of 1956, meant that the country was more accessible to a large part of the population than it had ever been before. So the open road indicated freedom, and traveling by car reflected Americans' images of themselves: self-sufficient, curious, spontaneous, even beautiful. It was a way for families to spend time together and see the expansive country they called home, to experience its culture and natural beauty. Now, through the 1950s and 60s, the highway became the most common way for American families to travel. Motels and roadside attractions sprang up along the highway to accommodate travelers. But this wasn't the same experience you would get if you were Black. Now, imagine rolling into a city and there's 50 hotels, but only 3 of them will take you. Black travelers often carried extra food, extra cans of gas, sleeping bags, pillows in case they couldn't find a place to stop and they'd have to camp in a field, even an empty coffee can in case they couldn't find a place to use the restroom. Racial segregation in the United States was a period of legal and social separation of people based on race in the late 19th and mid-20th century, and it was enforced through Jim Crow laws. So planning a trip for a Black American meant planning for survival. Black Americans faced serious risk whenever they traveled, not just for leisure, but for work. Think about the military service and if you had to relocate. Think about whether someone was a musician and they wanted to travel, a salesman, a traveling nurse or caretaker, a preacher or a minister, or even a family moving west. The threat of being denied service, or even worse, was always present. This was the reality of segregation in America, legal in some places, unofficial in others, but always there. Even in states like Nebraska, Black travelers faced real obstacles in navigating the open roads safely. So these photos up here, these are not from Nebraska, but they're from nearby. This is from Kansas. This is a sign from a sundown town. So if you were Black or a minority, you would not want to be in the town after dark, sometimes through actual ordinances. Sometimes it was unspoken, but you would be met with violence. So oftentimes if you were Black and you were getting ready to travel, you would go at night so that nobody could see who was driving in the car. Top right, this is from one of our national parks. Even the picnic areas were segregated. It's hard to read here, but this says, "This door, white only, colored in rear." So you couldn't even go through the same door. White waiting room, interstate passengers. This is a bus stop. So if you were waiting for the bus, you could not wait in the same room as a white person. And finally, in the top left, this photo is really emotional. This is a young Black boy who's drinking from a segregated water fountain. So, in response to this environment, the Negro Motorist Green Book emerged. It was a travel guide to help Black travelers move through the country with dignity, safety, and some peace of mind. The Negro Motorist Green Book was published annually from 1936 to 1966, and it gave Black travelers route to safety and dignity in a country that was physically accessible but socially restricted. It listed safe places for Black travelers to eat, sleep, get gas, shop, and find entertainment. The Green Book was created by Victor Hugo Green. He was born in 1892. His original model for the Green Book was inspired by Jewish travel guides, which were used to navigate anti-Semitic areas in restricted hotels in the 1930s. So Green saw the potential for a similar tool to empower Black travelers. Now, Green was not a publisher. He was not a journalist or an entrepreneur. He was a postal worker in Harlem, one of the very few stable, respectable, middle-class jobs Black men in the early 20th century could have. So his job with the United States Postal Office, which was one of the largest single employers of Black Americans at the time, gave him access to an informal but reliable network of Black postal workers across the country. So he used his network to crowdsource listings, a very analog version of crowdsourcing long before Yelp or Google reviews. Victor Hugo Green relied on his grassroots network to build the Green Book. But he also found rare corporate support from Esso, the Standard Oil of New Jersey, now ExxonMobil. That's what that picture right there is. His progressive corporate partner, Esso, not only sold the guide at its stations, giving it national visibility, but also hired Black franchise owners, many of whom contributed listings to the Green Book. This relationship helped Green expand the guide's reach across the U.S., making Esso a key partner in enabling safer, more empowered travel for Black Americans. There are around 15,000 issues that started selling a year once Esso became a partner. His first edition was only 16 pages long, and that ballooned to over 100 pages by the end of it. It became a staple item for many Black families, not just those who wanted to enjoy cross-country travel. So this is what they look like. You can go to the New York Public Library digital collections, and they have most of the Green Books that we have left still digitized, and you can actually flip through them page by page. They are organized by state, so you can go find Nebraska and find each town, and under each town is each address. The very first edition in 1936 focused on just 5 boroughs of New York, and it grew to cover the entire United States, Canada, and parts of the Caribbean. So it was organized, like I said, it was organized by state, separated further by city. International listings began emerging around 1949, so that's that one with the orange circle right there. And there were over 10,000 recorded listed sites in total across US, Mexico, Canada, and Bermuda. Now you'll notice there's a few editions missing. That's because the Green Book was published annually except during World War II, for ration's sake. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended segregation, and just 2 years later, you'll notice that the Green Book went out of print. Another thing I want to point out is if you look at the covers, look right here, look right here, look right here, and right here. Who do you notice is depicted on the Green Book? White people. I don't know entirely. As I said, our research is still ongoing on this matter, but I'm assuming that's for economic and commercial reasons. As I mentioned, this was sort of the unspoken part of our history. So here, this map, you'll find this on our Green Book page that I mentioned earlier. We have documented the estimated 66 sites that we had across Nebraska. Today we know that there's at least 24 that are still extant, but even less of those actually retain their historic integrities. They've been changed, altered in some sort of way that they don't reflect the way that they might have looked during the Green Book. The red pins they are no longer around. The yellow pins are we're not sure what condition they're in. And the Green Book, or the green ones they're still extant and they're potentially eligible for listing. So one of the key questions we're asking in our Nebraska research is, why here? Why did a certain site get listed when others didn't? So Nebraska, we're kind of known as being a flyover state or a pass-through state, but I would argue that that's because we were the crossroads of east and west travel. So we had US Highway 30, Lincoln Highway, and the I-80 corridor, which were all key stops for Black travelers between Chicago, Denver, and Kansas City. So Omaha, it makes sense. Because Omaha had the highest Black population in the state, so we'd expect a lot of listings there, but we see relatively few formal lodgings. So these are mostly tourist homes or places that people operated out of their own home, kind of like an Airbnb. It also meant a lack of capital access for Black entrepreneurs. So we also see barbershops and beauty parlors doing double duty as travel hubs. Now, Lincoln tells us a little bit of a different story. There were listings in Lincoln, but far fewer Black-owned businesses overall. The Green Book sites that exist often reflect domestic hospitality networks rather than commercial ones. So historian Jessica Levy calls it makeshift economies of protection. Scottsbluff has 2 listings that are especially surprising. The area had almost no Black residents, but it was a critical node along travel in military corridors. So in other words, Black people didn't live there, but they passed through. And so the listings are provisional outposts in otherwise isolating territory. So this isn't just geography, it's social cartography. We started seeing Green Book listings emerging in Nebraska in the late 1930s, early 1940s. Again, Omaha and Lincoln were the anchors. The listings were mostly modest, like I said, tourist homes, beauty shops, cafes, places often operated out of or adjacent to Black-owned businesses and homes. They weren't large motels. There wasn't large signage. They were low visibility, high trust places. It's also important to note that many of these were homes and businesses owned by Black women. These women were not professional hoteliers. They were often beauticians, homemakers, community leaders who took on significant risk by opening their homes and businesses to travelers during segregation. So this work acted as both economic empowerment and community protection, building on grassroots networks that help Black travelers survive and even find moments of comfort and dignity on the road. Now, most people think segregation only happened in the South, but Nebraska's story tells us otherwise. So from the 1930s to 1960s, Nebraska practiced de facto segregation. So this wasn't through explicit Jim Crow laws, but through banking policies, real estate practices, zoning codes, and unspoken social rules. So this map right here, this shows the redlining neighborhoods in Lincoln. This is the University of Nebraska, so we're somewhere in here. The maps were, the red lines didn't just shape where Black people could buy homes, it affected where they could open businesses, send their kids to school, and whether they had access to safe infrastructure, credit, or insurance. And for travelers, those lines also signified where they might or might not be welcomed. So this map shown here, it's from the Homeowners Loan Corporation, or the HOLC. It was a federal agency created in 1933 to stabilize the housing market during the Great Depression. In the late 1930s, the HOLC sent surveyors to cities across the country, including Lincoln and Omaha, to assess mortgage risk in different neighborhoods. So what they did is the areas were color-coded based on perceived desirability. So green was the best. You can see some green right here. Blue, still desirable. Yellow, declining, and red was hazardous. And often they were just hazardous because Black people, immigrants, or low-income people lived in those neighborhoods. Regardless of the upkeep, regardless of how much money they actually had, this practice is what gave rise to the term redlining. Even though HOLCs didn't directly deny loans, like I said, banks and insurers used these maps to justify decades of disinvestment in Black communities. So we also see, here's a side-by-side of Lincoln's map with the Lincoln Green Book sites. And you'll notice Lincoln actually doesn't have a lot of Green Book sites that are still extant. We have one, but they almost line up one for one with the areas that were redlined. Here is Lincoln's remaining Green Book site. It was the tourist home of Mrs. E. Edwards at 2420 P Street. I think it's just a coincidence that the door in the top is green. But it does help if you decide you want to go drive by and take a look at it for yourself, because it's not too far from here. This is its, oh my gosh, I keep mixing the pointer up. This is the listing in the Green Book in 1940, what it actually looks like. And you can see Mrs. Edwards' home listed right there. Now, in some places like Lincoln, a bigger city, they did include the address, but we found in our research in some of the smaller places like Scottsbluff or Ainsworth, they didn't include the address. So that's also made it a little bit difficult. But if you lived in the city, then you would know where maybe one of the only cafes was. So they didn't have to put that in there. Here's Omaha's Green Book sites. Again, nearly every Green Book listing in Omaha is located in North Omaha, especially around the 24th Street corridor. So the Green Book didn't just document safe travel, it mapped the racial borders of the city. So again, they line up. There's North 24th, and here's the remaining sites. I want to give a big recognition, a big shout out to the Omaha Making Invisible History's Visible program, Omaha Public Schools, because they've already conducted a lot of research on the Green Book. They actually had students go out and conduct oral interviews with community elders and Green Book scholars. They took field trips to the sites and research in local archives, and students mapped and documented the 30 former Green Book sites in Omaha. So this is what their webpage looked like, and you can actually go to each listing and see the pictures and see more about the story that the students uncovered. Something that they uncovered that is really important, but an often overlooked aspect of Nebraska's Green Book story is the role of Jewish-owned businesses in cities like Omaha. So facing their own experiences of discrimination, some Jewish entrepreneurs operated motels, restaurants, and service stations that welcomed Black customers when many white-owned businesses refused. So this also reveals how there were alliances across marginalized communities that helped sustain vital travel networks during segregation. Now I'm going to take you on a little virtual tour of just a few sites that are of interest. So the Cozy Grill you see there on the left, it is located at 2615 North 24th Street in Omaha. It was owned by Geraldine Craig. She was a Black woman entrepreneur. And the Cozy Grill operated from at least 1946 and was listed in the Green Book from 1947 to 1954. It was known for its juicy steaks and fresh seafood, but it was more than just a cafe. It was a safe, welcoming space for Black Omahans and travelers during segregation. In a time of exclusion, the Cozy Grill offered not only meals, but community, dignity, and safety. There is an ad for the Cozy Grill that was published in the Omaha Star, which is a Black-owned and ran newspaper. Though the restaurant's no longer in business, the building still stands. It's a private residence. I think, again, that it's just a coincidence that it's green. I don't know how that worked out, but so the Cozy Grill is one of the locations chosen and going to be nominated to the National Register of Historic Places. So we're very excited to start working on that nomination. Over here on the right, you might recognize this if you've been to Omaha a few times. It's the Broadview Hotel. It operated out of a large stone home at 2060 Florence Boulevard, formerly the North 19th Street area. Originally built in 1910 for Max and Flora Birkenroad. From 1931 to 1938, Ella Jackson, a Black woman, ran it as a rooming house and an informal hotel for Black guests. In 1940, Charles and Rosa Trimble, which I know it's hard to see, but Charles is on the left side here of the bride, and Rosa's on the right side here of the groom. They purchased the home and continued operating it as the Broadview Hotel, listing it as the Green Book through 1963. So it was listed from 1940 to 1963 in the Green Book, pretty much almost the entire time that Green Book existed. It remained in the Trimble family until 2007 and still stands today as a multifamily residence. It is currently in process of being listed for the National Register of Historic Places, and it'll actually go before our board in September of this year. Now, sadly, like I said, we have lost a lot of sites. This is one of the notable sites that no longer is extant. The Patton Hotel, located at 1014 to 1018 South 11th Street in Omaha. In the early 1910s, it was established by an African-American couple named Nicholas and Minnie Patton. The Patton Hotel was a vital home away from home for Black travelers during segregation. It was located just blocks from the Union and Burlington Station, and it primarily served Black railroad workers, baggage handlers, porters, chefs, and it hosted celebrities like Joe Louis, Cab Calloway, and Dinah Washington. So Union Pacific even contracted with the Pattons at one point to house its African-American employees. And after his death, Nicholas's death in 1941, Minnie relocated the hotel to 2425 Erskine Street and ran it until her passing in 1969 at age of 99. So the hotel appears in Green Book from 1939 until its final edition in 1966 to 1967. So this is a really, really sad one to lose. The original site is now Omaha's main post office loading dock at 11th and Pacific. Oh, and the picture here, this is one of the only pictures we have in our archive of the inside of the Paddock Hotel. Looks like there's 3 guests here. We're unknown when the date was taken, but if I had to guess, it was probably when it was operating as a Green Book site. Fremont has a couple sites, just 2, one that's still extant. It's the former Shady Nook Cabins, built in 1925. It encompasses 7 brick cabins, a brick office building, and some really cute stucco houses at 300 West 22nd Street. As I mentioned, research is still ongoing for this site, but we're hoping it'll be a future National Register candidate as well. And it does reflect mostly what it probably would have looked like when it was operating as a Green Book site. Sydney and Scotts Bluff. So Sydney has unfortunately lost its one Green Book site. It was located at 1701 Illinois Street. But it was Long Pine Court, so again, a place for Black Americans to stay. On the right here, we have the map for Scotts Bluff. It has 2 extant sites. So we see the Marquee Opera House there on the left. It is already listed as a National Register site. However, the nomination does not include the Eagle Cafe, which was an operating Green Book site. It's located at 1603 Broadway Street, and that picture you see in the middle is an Asian immigrant family that started it. And they, again, were open to Black travelers stopping and enjoying their food. And then we have the Welsh Rooms Hotel on the right, 1015 9th Street. It is still in wonderful condition, another hopeful National Register candidate in the future. Ainsworth. Again, I told you earlier that one of the questions we ask ourselves is why here? Why this place? Especially in a place in Ainsworth. So what we've discovered is that it's likely probably for economic reasons, but there was a variety of hotels, tourist homes, restaurants, and service stations. And there might have been a nearby jazz club that brought a lot of entertainers in the area, so they might have seen a lot of economic benefits from this. Skinner's Service Station and Cabins, located at 221 South Main Street, is one of these sites that's still extant. These are also Scotts Bluff sites, so that brings me into some of the challenges and opportunities. On the bottom left here, this is the former Top Notch Cafe in Ainsworth, and it's now a Napa Auto Parts. So unfortunately, that one has lost integrity and will not be eligible for listing, but we still will commemorate these sites, even if they are not eligible for listing. 411 North Walnut Street in Ainsworth, Nebraska, once a service station that was listed in the Green Book. It's been moved from its original location, and unfortunately, once you move a site, it's no longer eligible for the National Register. So some of the issues we've had. So one of them is identifying owners and gaining permission. That was a lot harder than I anticipated it being because things have changed hands so many times. Demolition, city infill, and deterioration of character-defining features, Ainsworth is one of those places where they have a lot of sites. However, a lot of those sites no longer retain their integrity. So they don't tell the story in quite the same way. Another thing that we ran into that I didn't think about before the research design was the lack of documentation of actual use. So we have lots of documentation. We know these were Green Book sites, but there's not a lot of documentation about what they were doing here, what was going on, what kind of events were going on, what kind of conversations were being had. And then finally, unanswered questions about those outlier locations that I mentioned. So something I did want to bring your attention to is that when we talk about the Green Book, it's really tempting to see it as a reminder of a really painful past, but it's so much more than that. So first, I want you to think of the Green Book as survival infrastructure. Black communities built decentralized, cooperative logistic networks to ensure safety across the country, a safety across the country that was actively hostile to their presence. There was no formal system. This was entirely grassroots. Second, the freedom of movement made it possible. The freedom of movement that Green Book made possible was radical. So for white families, road trips were a leisurely activity. And for Black Americans, these were acts of resistance, claims to the right to mobility, privacy, and independence. Third, the Green Book relied on invisible networks of everyday people, postal workers, business owners, travelers, who helped gather and verify listings. So there was no GPS, no social media or centralized media platforms, so it's quite impressive. And finally, it was a document of hope in a hostile landscape. It didn't just help people avoid harm, it assumed Black travelers deserved joy and leisure and dignity and opportunity. It pointed towards a better future, even when navigating a painful present. So what's next? So this project will be completed in May 2026. We have been working with a few project partners. The Durham Museum in Omaha is going to be hosting a traveling Green Book exhibit from the Smithsonian. And to go along with that, the Great Plains Black History Museum is going to be hosting a local Nebraska Green Book exhibit. So they will be on display at the same time next May. I encourage you to get up to Omaha and go take a look at it. They've been working really, really hard for a number of years now on this project. And you'll be able to take Green Book tours with the North Omaha Legacy Tours coming soon in Omaha. So if you go onto our website, like I mentioned earlier, you'll find resources to look into all of those more. I didn't plan to talk this much, so I want to leave you for like 5 minutes to ask some questions. But thank you again for coming and listening, and we're very excited about this Green Book project. And yeah, any questions?
Thank you so much for sharing that and just for all the work you're doing to preserve that important part of our history. Okay, questions. I will bring the mic around to you.
I talked so much, I covered it all.
I was curious whether this is part of a national effort or a national program, or if each state is working on its own to do this.
Yes, so each state, a lot of states have already done Green Book efforts. Nebraska is a little bit behind. A lot of southern states where there were a lot more Green Book sites have already completed Green Book projects. This was something that was brought to me when I first started here. So this is just a state effort, but we are collaborating with a lot of the other states to find out what kind of information they've gathered and how they've gone about it. But yeah, I highly encourage you to look, just even search Green Book Project, and it will probably come up for you, all the different states and what work they've done. They have a very similar like online presence as us, so interactive maps and pictures and stories, a lot of local oral histories. So yeah, this is just with our state.
Jane, what surprised you or shocked you most as you dug into this?
I thought it was going to be relatively, not easy, but I thought it would be a little bit more easy than doing, say, like a geographic survey where I know where everything is in this one county. It's only 66 sites, right? So I thought, sure, that can't be that hard. but really just the lack of documentation, how underground, like grassroots it was, makes it really hard to research. So I think that was probably the most eye-opening for me. I've had to work really hard at uncovering some of the stories.
So some of the buildings that you hope to mark as being a Green Book place, once it's marked, do you help with funding to help keep it viable and keep that open and without it deteriorating?
Sure. So that is the one limitation with the National Register and with preservation efforts, is that we don't provide direct funding, but when you're eligible for listing, so when you're on the National Register, it opens you up to things like grants. So we do like sub-grant out, and the property owners will be able to apply for those. The biggest thing it does is it just brings awareness. It's honorary, so it's a starting place, really.
Do they have to pay taxes if it's a registered?
The Register program does not affect your taxes at all, no.
I was wondering in this part of the world if the Green Book and how it might apply to Native Americans.
That's a wonderful question that I haven't actually looked into too much. Like I mentioned, this is still ongoing research, so we'll receive our first official report or draft in September. So this is a lot of the research I've done up to this point, but that is a really good thing to ask questions about, how other minorities use it. A lot of the mentions I've seen so far have really just focused on how Black travelers and Jewish people, since they were the models for the Green Book. But I'll definitely put that on my to-do list to look into more. Thank you.
Do you interview any of the people that were alive during that time period with their stories? And is that part of your research?
Yes, so we've tried. That's what this little part is. So if you know somebody that lived through the Green Book, owns a property or experienced it, you can actually share your stories and photos with us. What we decided to do is to try to do as much research as we can using our archival materials and reaching out to other interested stakeholders. And then we're planning on using oral histories to kind of fill in the gaps of things that we couldn't find. So yes, we absolutely are using and will continue to use oral histories. Especially since it was grassroots. So like I said, there was not everything was written down. It was mostly spoken.
So Jade, I know, wonderful presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
And we put out a call, though, early on in this project, right, asking people to contact us. And can you talk about the response to that a little bit?
Yes. For the oral histories? Yes. So there's a lot of interested people, lots and lots of interested people. The first time we did this, we got no responses. Not a single person, even with doing newspaper releases and stuff like that. Luckily, like I said, we have project partners with the Durham Museum, Omaha Public Schools, and the Great Plains Black History Museum, who've already been doing work. So we're kind of leaning on them for a lot of those connections. And then what I'm going to do at the end, or like after we receive some of our reports, is see if maybe do a little bit more of grassroots work on my own and go out into the community and do some good old-fashioned, hey, would you like to share your story? Yes.
Last call for questions. Okay, wonderful. Let's thank Jade one more time for sharing her research with us. I hope you'll join us at our August Lunchbox lecture. It'll be August 19th, and our collections team here from the Historical Society will be sharing. So we're very lucky that they're going to share their expertise with us, so we hope to see you then. Thank you.